I know this is an education event, but I do have a confession to make. I actually never wanted to be a teacher. In fact, I pitied teachers. It seemed like a special kind of torture to corral frivolous teenagers to love both the Pythagorean theorem and literature in the same day. I wanted to be a banker. In my heart, I pictured myself in a pinstripe suit, walking broad-shouldered into the mouth of my corner office, where I sipped black coffee, grabbed a newspaper, and stared quizzically at our stock price. You see, this image was the epitome of success. And as a child, a son of Nigerian immigrants, I knew my success was also their success. So yes, I wanted to be a banker. And I was well on my way. I got the opportunity to go to one of those fancy colleges where you rub shoulders with the sons and daughters of diplomats and senators, the kind that would look you in the eye, point in the direction of the White House and say, one day I'm going to be president. And they meant it. I coveted that confidence. I coveted their position in life. I wanted to be a banker. Even though I majored in English while I was in college, I spent all of my summers working at a bank, a prominent bank. I worked in customer service, customer retention, marketing, sports marketing. I spent my mornings answering the phone calls of customers looking for a credit line increase, and spent the rest of the afternoon in a boardroom where executives brainstormed the future of the industry. In my last summer at the bank, I got the opportunity to interview for the Management Development Program, a program that groomed the next leaders of the bank. Every question the interviewer rattled off, I knew the answer to. What's a retail residual finance charge? I knew it. Who leads advertising in our main office? I knew it. What's today's stock price? I knew it. I could smell the pinstripes. But then she leaned back in her chair and leaned forward. And then she asked me the question that changed the whole trajectory of my life. She asked me, what will make you the happiest? Working here at the bank or designing a course that could potentially change the world? And I'm like, what? I'm at a bank interview. You're talking about courses. And of course I couldn't say that. So I just repeated back to her. I said, designing a course? She said, yes, designing a course that could change the world. Now I have to admit, there's something about the loftiness of that question that did intrigue me, but again, I'm at a bank interview, so I couldn't really, address it. So I just said in a voice that I thought was my most confident. I said, working here at the bank. I will never forget the face she gave me when I said that. It's like you're like a mother looking at a young son who's goofily dressing for school, and you laugh at him. But she looks at him and says, there is no way I'm letting you leave the house like that. This interviewer looked me in the eye and said, I don't believe you. She said that you need to be a teacher. She's called it my destiny. She said, go interview at a school. And if you don't like it, come back here. This job is yours. But I have a funny feeling you will never come back. In fact, I have a funny feeling you're not even going to remember my name. I remember going back on the subway, back to that fancy college, and I just cried in my dorm room. I was devastated. It looked like everybody who was walking outside my window had a first-class ticket to gainful employment. And here I was on the doorstep, ready to grab my ticket. And the interviewer said she didn't believe me. So I figured I would do as she said. I'll go interview at a school, I'll hate it, and I'll go back and grab the job I really deserved. The school I interviewed at was in my hometown, Newark, New Jersey. It was a school where young black and brown kids shook your hand when you walked into the building. Their uniforms was formal and crisp, but their smiles was genuine and soulful. These were kids who reminded me of myself, trotting confidently to success. The teachers, well, they had rolled up sleeves and chalk stains on their shirts. They had lanyards bouncing from their chests. This is a school where that it was clear that real education happened here. This is a school where teachers were igniting the passions of the young people. During the interview process, you have to do a sample lesson. So I had opportunity to do my sample lesson with 11th graders, and we were reading Macbeth. And every question I asked them, they knew the answer to. They would raise their hand and say, that is an abuse of power. They would say, Macbeth, he's greedy. In fact, it's his greeds, not the bullets, that ultimately kills him. And I think it clicked for me at that moment, the real possibility and promise of education. Here were young people looking at a system, albeit a fictional system, and saying this right here is an abuse of power, that this right here is greed. And it got me thinking, what if they could use that same language to articulate the abuses of power and the greed that often populates neighborhoods like my own? In the final interview with the principal now, and after she, asked me all of her questions, see, her last moment was this. She told me that education is the civil rights movement of our time, and we teachers are at the front line. And I was fired up, and I knew right there, at that moment, that I now wanted to be a teacher. But not just any teacher. I wanted to be the kind of teacher that made use of those incredible conversations about power and greed and actually turned them into opportunities to change our neighborhoods. Yeah, we could write essays about the symbolism of the knives and the blood and all of that. All of that is great, but what if we use the language of literature to potentially upend the systematic oppression that often plagues Newark and other neighborhoods like it? But after a couple years of teaching, though, it seemed to me that our schools, in particular high schools, is more concerned with college admission than social justice. And rightfully so. I mean, I grew up in an environment where there wasn't exactly a thriving tradition of young people going to college. And perhaps by introducing college as a viable option, that too is a kind of justice. But I often wonder, and I honestly still wonder, what if college admission sets the bar too low? What if schools could accomplish more? One night in my third year of teaching, I had a dream that students were in suits in a meeting with senators quoting Toni Morrison. Picture it, policy being derived from the bluest eye. I woke up from that dream and I drew all of these moments and diagrams and things of this nature to make sense of what this could mean for my classroom and my students. I remember coming to work that day and I grabbed two of my colleagues into my classroom. I sequestered them really. I closed the door and I drew those exact diagrams that were in my notebook on the board. And I was saying how these students can use literature for activism. They could change their world using Toni Morrison. And my colleagues, they were looking at me, they were nodding, and they were smiling at the right moments, but I knew they thought I was crazy. It was clear to me that perhaps this whatever this thing was, it was me banking on social capital and not financial capital. A couple months later, after many revisions, I finalized a course called the New Community Project. And what we would do is that we would partner with a nonprofit organization and read them like a living text. So what I mean by that is, what if we analyzed the world outside our window, the local shop owners, the barbers, the activists, the people who help young people cross the street, and what if we read them like literature? And what if we compare their stories to the stories like Macbeth? We would ask them, what is our community's main characters and who are their antagonists? What are their passions, motivation, ambitions? How does setting impact their story? And what is the implication of the intersectionality of race, class, gender, sexuality? And I'm wondering, by having these living texts in conversation with these traditional literary texts, we give the students an opportunity to view their communities through the lens of empathy and not pity. And instead of writing essays, perhaps they would do social impact projects as a grand testament to their year-long study of living text and traditional text. I think in this way, this project, this class expands the current model of literary instruction, of just reading, discussing, and writing, by adding two more steps: strategy and action. In this new framework, the student essay is no longer the final destination of each text. In fact, the student essay is stripped from its purely academic skin and becomes a useful document for collaboration and action. For example, just last month, a student wrote an essay that argued that love is what arms our protagonists with a multi-dimensional movement, that love is what prohibits our protagonists from being contained within the walls of a linear narrative. This precise analysis gives this student and our class a unique lens to investigate and interrogate their own community. They can ask questions like, how does this community arm its youth with multi-dimensional movement? Who or what has been contained within the walls of a linear narrative? I believe the New Com framework continues the tradition of close reading, active discussion, and clear writing instruction. But it also opens the door to powerful new possibilities and outcomes. I've been teaching this course now for the past 5 years, and we have done some really amazing projects. We've turned libraries into maker spaces. We've held fundraisers at local bars, and even forged relationships between community activists. But my favorite project is what we did in the Brewerytown neighborhood in Philadelphia. Brewerytown, like a lot of neighborhoods all across the country, is undergoing a renaissance period. What was once one of the poorest zip codes in the city is now adorned with bars and eateries and cool brunch spots and artisan beer stores. This so-called renaissance is great, and a lot of people benefit from it. But we often wonder, who are those who are locked out of that experience? So our class did a deep dive into the Brewerytown neighborhood. We combined our study of the novel On Such a Full Sea by Shang-Rae Lee with a deep dive with the living text of the Community Partnership School, an independent school looking to expand to the neighborhood. By analyzing both texts, one of the emerging themes was access. Who has access to all of these shiny new businesses, and who has all of these access to these new amenities, and how can we make sure this neighborhood becomes a truly cohesive neighborhood? So the students created t-shirts, they raised money, they rented out a dance studio, they hired a yoga teacher, and extended free access to yoga, dance, and meditation to the neighborhood. All things that are often locked out of people, longtime residents of these neighborhoods. Before we dived into our poses, our students asked the residents about their dreams and hopes for the neighborhood. I will never forget one of the participants raising her hand and saying, "Just last week, my son was shot in this neighborhood. And when I saw an ad for these free meditation classes, I considered it a gift from God." She said, "Perhaps this is how I get peace." I submit to you today that our students can do more than be prepared for college. We are living in a time where the status quo of business as usual or schools as usual is severely out of touch with the lives of our young people. Our classes need not be merely classes. They can be the unique lens that allows our students to see their communities in their true shape. These classes are not just classes, they are tools. And with the tools of math, science, art, history, gym, photography, and literature, they are being armed to radically and boldly change the world. I guess that interviewer was right. I really don't remember her name.